What's going on, YouTube? This is BoxingWave. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, smash that like button as well if you enjoyed the content, all right? We're going to be talking Caleb Plant against Canelo Alvarez next weekend on Showtime pay-per-view for the Undisputed Super Middleweight Championship. This is going to be the first in history Undisputed Super Middleweight Championship, all right? Canelo Alvarez is currently holding the WBC, the WBO, and the WBA championships, where Caleb Plant is holding the IBF title right now. All right, so Canelo has 3 of the 4 majors, and Plant has 1. Plant won his title against Jose Uzcategui a couple years back, and he's defended it 3 times since then. All right, he's always fought at this division. All right, he's naturally the bigger man. He's 6'1". He has like a 3-inch reach advantage over Canelo, who is only like 5'8", I believe Canelo is. All right, so he's taller. Plant is taller. He has the longer reach. He has the youth advantage. He's like a couple years younger than Canelo, all right? I want to say his best wins were against Caleb Truax, Porky Medina, and against Jose Uzcategui, who he beat to win the title, all right? I think that's probably his toughest fight to date, all right? He's an orthodox fighter, very slick. You know, a lot of people say that he has the style to beat Canelo because Canelo has struggled against good boxers, good slick fighters in the past. All right, so people say that he has a style to beat Canelo, but Canelo has been in there with this style before. It's just that because Canelo struggled in the past, people think that Caleb has what it takes to beat Canelo because of the size as well, the youth, the height and the reach advantage. You know, Caleb has great tools though. You know, I think when I look at him, and I've been doing film study recently, I wasn't even going to do the breakdown this soon, but you know, when I have some downtime, I like to look at his fights. I look at Canelo fights just to compare, and what I see in Plant is that, you know, he's pretty good defensively. He definitely moves very well. He has a mixed bag of tricks. You know, he likes to set traps. He's a good counter puncher. Makes good use of his jab. Has very, very quick hands. And he's just able to read his opponents well. Okay, I know he hasn't fought the best opponents, but he's able to read them well. He has a good, respectable amount of power. 21 wins, 12 knockouts. But not knocking out and stopping the best opponents he's faced, okay? He's dropped guys like Jose Uzcategui, who's probably the best fighter he's fought at this point, but hasn't really knocked out the top guys. Most of the guys like the Mike Lees of the world, the Vincent Feigenboots, are guys that are not at the elite level or like D-level fighters. Those are the guys that he stops. All right, but when he fought the Truax, who is far past it and was never really that much of a great fighter, those type of guys are the guys that he wasn't really capable of stopping. All right, so yeah, Caleb Plant. I'm gonna probably mess it up a few times here. Plant. I think one of his biggest strengths though is what he's able to do with his lead left hand. Okay, he's an orthodox fighter, but the way that he's able to paw his jab and measure his opponents really well with his jab, all right? Plus, he can throw his jab in different ways and from different angles. Sometimes he likes to lean back and pop that jab. Like, he can lean back really far, put a lot of weight on his back foot, shooting that jab, all right? And he's really slippery, so he's able to pivot around his opponents and just keep popping that jab, popping it to the body. Well, very good power jab to the body, continuously with throughout the fight. He's also able to manipulate that jab, all right, and turn it and turn it into a hook as well, which is one of his best punches, that lead left hook. He's very quick with it, and he could be very explosive with it. So he can do a lot with that lead hand. He sticks it out there, but you don't know what you're actually getting, you know. He could paw it and probe it. He can turn it into a hook, and he can shoot it from different positions. All right, so he's very his jab is one of his key strengths in this fight. What he can do with the right hand is he definitely shoots a lot of rights to the body. You know, a lot of straight right hands. Counter, knows how to step around and use that right hand to throw hooks when his opponent is not facing him straight. You know, he knows how to keep his head off the line as well for the most part. And he tries to stay off the line. You know, he likes to move and use lateral movement throughout the fight. I mean, he's what we would call a slick fighter. You know, he does all of those things well. All right. And we've seen Canelo fight people that fight similar to him. All right. But let's see what he can do when it comes to his height and his reach. Can he do it better than some of the other guys that Canelo has faced? And I think that's the biggest question. And going into Canelo and just breaking him down. Canelo, I've been watching him for a long time, and he's developed as a fighter over the years. He's fought some really tough fights that I didn't always think, you know, I didn't always agree with the judges in his fights. You know, I think that Canelo has definitely developed, but I don't think he's always been as dominant as the judges may say. He's definitely struggled in fights before. All right, he's definitely had issues. But all of these fights has made him a much better fighter. You see the Floyd Mayweather loss, right? You see that fight, and you see that Floyd definitely clearly outpointed him, right? So he's struggling in that, but you can tell that he learned from that fight. So when he went into the Lara fight, which he struggled again, and many people believe that he didn't win that fight, you saw the adjustments being made. When he was getting outboxed, he started to be aggressive, started to throw hooks to the body. You know what I'm saying? He started to really turn up in those fights. So you have that fight, and then you go up and you go to the Triple G fight, where at this point, Canelo always had conditioning issues, all right? Stamina issues. So you saw in that fight where they gave it a draw. I personally think Triple G won the fight, pretty clear too, but they made it a draw. I think Canelo got a gift in that fight. But then you go to the next fight with Triple G, where that first fight Canelo was on, he was a completely different fighter in the rematch. You know, Canelo learned, like, I'm going to stand in the center of the ring with one of the hardest punchers in the sport, one of the best jabbers and the most active jabbers in the sport. And he stood in the middle of the ring with him and exchanged blow for blow with him. All right. And that fight, since he moved up, fought Kovalev, fought the guys at 168, you know, fought Daniel Jacobs. Those fights, you can tell the growth from the Golovkin rematch all the way up to this point right here, you know, to the Billy Joe Saunders, which is his last fight. And, you know, when we pick apart Canelo, we really have to dig and go back to older fights where he struggled in against the slicker fighters. We have to dig and go back there. But when we look at the more recent challenges that he's had, he didn't struggle like he did back then because he had the experience in fighting all of these fighters, making him a better fighter. You know, I can't really say the same for Caleb Plant because Plant has not fought anyone that really put him under real pressure. You know, anyone that made him have to think fast. You know, he hasn't really been in any real danger. Now, I don't know what he's capable of at the very elite level because a lot of fighters step up when they are forced to step up. You know, so I'm expecting the best Caleb Plant we've ever seen because now he's fighting someone that is bringing the best out of him. Right? So we saw that with Shakur Stevenson and Jamel Herring last week. Jamel Herring, who was a champion at the division, very much more experienced to Shakur. Shakur coming in, not looking so hot against other fighters, not being able to stop past opponents, even though he dominated them all on the points. When he fought Jamel Herring, he was more aggressive and he was looking to stop Herring. Plant could be doing the same thing now that he's being forced to step up and finding the best fighter in the sport, pound for pound. Now he's being forced to step up. So we might see things that we haven't seen before from Caleb Plant. All right. But again, Canelo, if you want to compare, I think I would suggest the Daniel Jacobs fight. I think Daniel Jacobs probably has the most similarities to Plant. They don't fight exactly the same, but they definitely have the most similarities as far as style. I wouldn't compare him to Billy Joe Saunders. I know Saunders is very quick and very slick too, but he's a southpaw fighter. All right, and they don't have the same kind of weapons. You know, I think they're both just quick and they're both defensive, but they don't have the same style. So I would go to the Daniel Jacobs fight because Daniel displayed great defense in that fight. He made a great use of his jab. You know, he was able to ambush Canelo at times and step in and hook with Canelo, all right, and throw combinations with Canelo. The only thing is Daniel Jacobs could switch to a lefty at time to a southpaw position. In a couple of those rounds, he fought as a southpaw against Canelo, which we're not going to expect from Plant. But regardless, overall, I would say Jacobs is the best to look at as far as recent fights with someone similar to Plant's style. All right. So what do I think the fighters need to do? Well, Plant needs to make a big, huge use of his jabs. I noticed that now Canelo in the most recent years, the fighters that did the best against him or was able to win rounds against him were the guys that made a great use of his jabs. It's about everybody's taller than him and have a longer reach than him. But the fighters that did the best made a great use of their jab. Just kept the jab out there and kept measuring him, keeping that distance, that gap in between the two. Sergey Kovalev, even though he was stopped, he was winning rounds because he was using his jab well. Daniel Jacobs, another guy who went 12 with Canelo and did well against Canelo. Canelo did not dominate him. All right, so that's another fight you got to look at. Triple G in both fights, but especially the rematch. Triple G, the jab work in that fight was incredible. He kept landing jabs throughout the whole fight. This is what gives Canelo trouble. It's not just being slick and fighting a certain way. It's about making the use of the jab and keeping it active throughout the entire fight. So those are the guys that you want to really look at. And I think Caleb Plant, just to be competitive, he has to make a good use of his jab. He has to continue moving, all right, while he's using it and setting up those shots. All right, hopefully his conditioning is well, and hopefully it's better for this fight because he's had stamina issues. I've seen his fight with Truax where he gassed out late in that fight. I've seen his fight against even Caleb Truax where he gassed out in that fight a little bit. Yes, he's still winning the fight, but you saw the difference as far as his conditioning, and you saw him starting to get hit with a lot more shots than he was earlier in the fight. All right, so Caleb Plant has to be well conditioned in order to compete because even if you're doing well in the earlier rounds, which is what I'm predicting, I'm predicting Caleb to do well early on because he's going to be using his jab, he's going to be moving, he's going to be setting up traps for Canelo. You know, he's going to be doing well early. But Canelo is using those earlier rounds just to get the range in. He's going to be inching closer and closer just to see what shots he can land on you, what shots he can tag you with, all right? So Caleb has to be active, actively moving, actively shooting in the jab, shooting those right hands straight to the body. He has to keep working. Just to compete, he has to keep working, all right? You know, I know he's been talking about trying to stop Canelo and everything. I don't know if I can really believe that because he hasn't stopped any of the other top fighters he's fought. And those guys are not nearly as durable as Canelo. I know Canelo's smaller, but he's shown to be very, very durable. Plus, he's going to have you on your back foot the whole fight. Canelo is the guy that's going to be coming forward. He's going to be the one that's hunting you down. Plus, he's smaller, he's shorter. So he's the one that needs to get in and closer and get in range in order to land the clean shots against you. But Canelo's very accurate. He makes his punches count. All right, he's one of the most accurate boxers out there. So Caleb, just to compete, he has to be active. All right, and hopefully the stamina is able to hold up for him. Canelo, on the other hand, Canelo is just gonna have to keep that pressure going. You're fighting the younger, inexperienced fighter here, a guy that's never really have been pressured. So what you want to do is keep his mind racing. You don't want to give him time to think, and I think that's one of the biggest problems with Plant. He's fought guys that gave him time where he's just sitting there waiting. He doesn't have to throw anything. His opponent wasn't really throwing anything, and it was just a guy that was fighting at the pace that he wanted. So being that that's usually the case, Canelo don't want to give him no time to think. You want to just stay on him, just like he was against Billy Joe and Callum Smith and all these fighters that were taller and rangier. You don't want to give them time. You want to keep pressuring him. And sometimes Canelo, mentally, he drains you because he's not always throwing punches. Sometimes he's just making you work because you're trying to fend yourself, you're trying to fend Canelo off, and you're throwing punches while Canelo is just inching closer and closer and closer without even having to throw anything. He might give you a couple rounds away just to measure you, just to see if he can get in. So I think that Canelo needs to put that pressure. He's going to be coming in. He's going to have that active high guard. He's going to be moving. He's going to be parrying shots as he steps in. And then sometimes he's going to step in, throw a hook to the body. All right. Another thing with Canelo, I noticed with Plant gets caught with a lot of overhand rights, and I think a part of the reason is he gets blinded by the jab, which Canelo is going to be able to use. And Canelo is going to give Plant a lot of problems with his jab. Maybe not early on. I'm not talking about the first 2 or 3 rounds. I'm talking about like 4th, 5th, 6th round. Canelo's going to start really stepping in and shooting that power jab. But it's what comes behind it. It's that overhand right that I'm really concerned with Plant, because he keeps his guard low, right? Normally he keeps his guard low. He shoots his jab for the hip and everything. So that guard is low. Plant doesn't see a lot of right hands that's coming. So I've seen guys like Truax. I've seen guys like Uzcategui who was landing the right hands because Plant just didn't see him coming. Sometimes Plant shoots his jab and he doesn't see the right hand that's following his jab as he pulls it back. Sometimes the jab, sometimes his opponent throws a jab out there, follows it up with the right hand because he's blinded by the jab. And Canelo is the same way when it comes to manipulating that lead hand. He can do exactly what Plant can do it, but he can do it more, more often. He can shoot that jab, he can turn it, he can shoot it to the body, he can loop it and turn it into a hook, but he does it constantly. Which is very confusing, especially when you're being pressured and you're forced to be, moved back. And the thing is, too, you want to get Plant to the ropes. I know Plant likes to put himself there at times, all right, because he likes to set traps. But it's very dangerous for Plant to be in that position, that area, because you don't want Canelo. He has a mixed bag. You know what I'm saying? His punch selection is all over the place. All right, so he might be hitting you with things, and he's gonna be feinting. He's gonna be. You can't predict every shot he's gonna throw. All right, he's not like Jose Uzcategui where he's just trying to land the big right hand. No, Canelo might hook to the body. He might hook up top. He might feint and set up. It's just so many different things that Canelo could do. Canelo could do every single thing. All right, and then Canelo has the angles as well. He's not as limited as the Truaxes, the Uzcateguis of the world, the Porky Medinas. He's not as limited as those fighters there. So that is what makes the difference in experience and level of opposition, because those fighters that Canelo has fought has turned him into the monster he is right now. Whereas Plant, I'm really not sure what he can bring to this fight, because I haven't seen him fight at the very elite level. I know he's capable of winning a title against a good fighter, yes, but Jose Uzcategui is not. He's not at the very super elite. He's just not. He's not even proven at that level. He's won a few good fights against some good fighters that were really not in their prime anymore. So with all that being said, I'm expecting Canelo to stop Plant. And I mean, at some point, I'm thinking like 8th or 9th round. And there's so many ways that it can happen. You know, it could be a stoppage just based on accumulation of punches. You know, the way I could see the ref jumping in and waving it off, just the accumulations of punches. I could see his corner throwing in the towel. It doesn't necessarily have to be a knockout, but it could be a knockout. And it could be from a variety of punches. You know, it could be for the big overhand right. You know, I can see Plant, who likes to lean to his right a lot. I can see him getting caught with a hook low as he leans over. Similar to like Billy Joe Saunders, what happened with him when he leaned in to that uppercut. I can see that with Plant because he puts his head there at times. So he has to be careful with that as well. So many things that you have to worry about. And plus, the stamina. The stamina. If I can see you get tired by guys that's not on a high level and you're getting burnt out as a fight goes on and the defensive flaws start to get exposed, then I'm only expecting that from Canelo Alvarez to take advantage of those flaws at that point. All right, so it doesn't always matter. Like when we talk Canelo flaws, we have to really dig back. Yes, he's had them. Yes, no, I don't, I said earlier, I don't agree with all the judges. I don't agree with all the decisions in his fights. All right, but what I will say is that I've seen him improve with every single fight. You know, and you're facing him at his absolute maximum prime right now. You know, facing guys like Triple G, Daniel Jacobs, Sergey Kovalev, Floyd Mayweather, Erislandy Lara. It just, the list goes on and on and on. These make him the fighter that he is. A guy that's a master adjuster. It's just too much. You got to worry about his head movement. You got to worry about so many things because he has so many tools. And Plant, I just don't see him fighting at that level. You know, I think he needed more preparation for this fight. I personally believe he needed more preparation. And I think he needed to understand, get a good sense of his pacing. I don't think he's shown me that he's really got a good sense of his pacing up to this point. You know, I mean, in his most recent fight, I seen him getting gassed, and I don't think that's a good sign. I think Canelo is going to stop him. I'm thinking more 8th, in between the 8th and 10th rounds at some point. It could be by knockout, like I said. It could be any way, unless there's something that is out of the ordinary that happens, like a clash of heads where there's a cut involved between him or Canelo, where I can't see him beating Canelo on a point, and I can't see him beating Canelo by stoppage because even though he has respectable power, I don't think he has the power that Canelo would get really hurt by, especially after seeing Canelo in there with some of the beasts that he's fought. All right. So anyway, I have Canelo winning by an 8th to 10th round stoppage. All right. And I expect Plant to do good early on, but I expect Canelo to figure him out and dominate him at some point. All right. So anyway, make sure you subscribe again. Smash that like button if you like the content. And I'll see you on the next one. Peace.